Hello, welcome to our webinar today on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's Arts in the Schools grants for our fiscal year 2024, which runs from July 1st of 2023 through June 30th of 2024. I am Carolyn Koska. I'm the grants administrator here at Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, and we'll start by just running through what we're going to talk about today. We'll talk briefly about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. We'll look at the guidelines for this grant program. We will go over to our website and take a look at what resources are available for you there. Then we'll go into our grant system and walk through the application. And we'll finish up talking about the grant process, or what happens after you submit an application. If everyone would mute themselves for the time being, we'll stop a couple times for questions, and feel free to type things into the chat as well as questions come up. And then at the end, we can open things up and talk a little more about your specific projects too. So Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMAC, is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. Here's our region down in the southwest corner of the state. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota and work to get that state arts funding out into all corners of the state. And our funding does come mostly from the state of Minnesota. We have an allocation from their general fund, but the majority of the funding comes from the Arts and Cultural Heritage, or Legacy Fund. We also receive some funding from the McKnight Foundation that we use for our grants for artists, and from memberships and donations from around our region. And just to be a little more specific about what that region entails, that includes 18 counties, which are Big Stone, Chippewa, Cottonwood, Jackson, Candy, Ojai, Lac Parle, Lincoln, Lyon, McLeod, Meeker, Murray, Nobles, Pipestone, Redwood, Renville, Rock, Swift, and Yellow Medicine. And it also includes 2 tribal nations, Pajutazizi, Upper Sioux Community, and Shanshaiapi, Lower Sioux Community. And we acknowledge that this region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. As far as who can apply for these Arts in the Schools grants, this is open to public schools and to community education. And if you are either one of these but have a project that is more focused on the community in general, you can apply under our Art Project Grant Program instead. The kinds of things that you can do with this grant, the things that we see most often are artist residencies, where you're bringing a professional artist into the school to work with a core group of students for an extended period of time, usually over the course of a week. You might do an arts field trip, taking students to an art museum or gallery, some kind of arts performance, some combination thereof, maybe an artist studio. Or another possibility might be a juried student art exhibit where students are displaying their art and artists come in to give them some feedback on that. Those are just some options, the kinds of things that we usually see, but there may be other things that might work well for your school. Some requirements for this, it can happen during the school year, but it also can be the summer. It does need to be school related. So if you're taking a field trip during the summer, it might still need to be open to all the 5th graders in your school, for instance. And these projects also need to be open to all students within a grade or a subject discipline, like all of the English students, or an activity, all of the band or theater students. So that it's just not open to students in a particular club or students who are kind of handpicked by teachers. And we also want you to have some sort of community involvement where you're sharing back with the community what has gone on with this project. If you're bringing an artist in, having some time for a meet the artist event, perhaps, or if they're a performer, maybe they're giving a concert that's open to the community. If you're doing something like a field trip, some sort of just sharing back with the community what that experience was all about. So the grant is available for up to $4,000 and there are no matching funds required, which means that as long as your project cost is within that maximum amount that you can request, your school will not have to provide any funds toward that project. Some things to be aware of as far as eligibility. This list that we're going to go through is all things that are not eligible for SMOC grants. We cannot accept requests from parochial schools since we are using state funding for these grants. This can't go toward paying any school personnel unless you are needing to get a substitute teacher while the regular teacher is participating in the residency, for instance. Not eligible would be substitutions for regular school programs. So if your school has lost its art program, this grant would not be the place to fund getting that back. Also not eligible are supplies or equipment outside of what you actually need for this project that you're doing. We can't fund projects that don't have an art focus. We can't fund any activities that would take place outside of Minnesota. So unfortunately for those really down in the southwest corner, Sioux Falls is not an option for arts field trips. But again, with the state funding that we're using, everything needs to take place within the state. Also ineligible are activities for the religious socialization of the participants or audience, fundraising events. The grant should just be helping your project be able to break even, not to come up with a profit or do fundraising for any school needs. Also ineligible are payments of debts incurred before the grant begins, using these grant funds as a match for another grant from us. And if you have a past due final report with us, you are not eligible to apply again until that has come in. So this was a quick overview of some of the eligibility things to be aware of. So make sure to take a look at the guidelines and we'll look at where you can find those in a minute. But make sure to read through that just to make sure you are not missing anything important. All right, as far as application deadlines, this is a big change for us this year. In the past, we have had just 2 deadlines per year for you to apply. We are now moving toward an ongoing monthly deadline. So you can apply the first of each month from August through May. And then the earliest that you could start your project would be the first day of the following month. So for instance, if you got an application in by September 1st, then you would hear back on the grant and be able to start your project by October 1st. So we're hoping that this will allow some more flexibility in when people have time to actually put together their request and to also respond to some sudden opportunities that may arise. So we're really excited about this year and hoping that it will really be helpful to you. And then just pointing out that all of the applications are due at 4:30 p.m. on that deadline date. The system will not allow you to submit after that time. So you'll need to have a start date for your project. First, work out what that earliest allowed start date is depending on when you apply, and make sure you're picking the right round that makes the most sense for your project, because you can't start any project activities before that start date. So you can't pay your artist, you can't buy theater tickets. schedule your buses, purchase any supplies. So no spending of funds before that start date. So make sure when you are choosing that, you're not putting the start date the first day of your residency or your field trip. You need that time beforehand in order to complete those preparations. Then you'll also need an end date, and make sure that you give yourself plenty of time to finish up the project and do some evaluation on that, because grants that are awarded this year have until June 30th of 2025 to finish up. So depending on when you apply, that could be close to 2 years that you could possibly have to complete your project. You'll need to have 2 people connected to your application. First, you'll need a project director, and this will be whoever is most directly responsible for the project. Oftentimes, it's a art or music teacher or other classroom teacher who's really bringing this in and being responsible for the day-to-day of what's going to happen with the project. And then you'll need an authorizing official, which is somebody from your school who has that authorizing power. That might be the principal or the superintendent. And these cannot be the same person. You need to have 2 separate people. And both will need to sign your application and future grant documents like your contract. And we're going to pause for a moment if there are any questions at this point. Well, I'm not hearing any questions at the moment, so we are going to keep moving along, and we're going to head over to our website. All right, so we have actually had a redo of our website within the last month or so. So I want to just give a little tour of where to find things. Now we're hoping that the navigation is a little more intuitive for you. So everything you are going to need is under this grants tab. The first big change, we've got our login link right here at the top. So that should be easy for you to get into our grant system. And then you would go and choose your grants for schools and youth to look at the grant we're talking about today. And we'll come back to this page for a second, but I want to point out we've got a link to the Compass roster of artists, which is a Minnesota-based roster of artists who are available to work in schools, and we'll just take a look at that quickly. They have a roster of teaching artists, and you can take a look on here and look for maybe different kind of discipline that you might be looking for. And then they tell a little bit about the artist, what kinds of programs they'd have available, including what ages they are targeted at. So this can be a really great resource to find really interesting artists to bring into your school. But now we'll head back over to our page for our Arts in the Schools grants. And at the top of the page here, we have our guidelines right here. And as I mentioned before, really important to make sure to read through this so you're not missing any important details. Another link to get to our grant system. And then here are all of the important dates you need to know, including an example of how to figure out your timeline for when you need to apply. And then after we're done with our workshop here today and have our video ready, that video will be posted here so you can return and take a look at that. And then we've just got some materials down here. One I will point out are we have the application questions in a Word document. Sometimes people like to work on that first and then paste their answers into the grant system later. A couple other things I just want to point out. Under our grants help, we have this workshops and assistance page. This just goes through all of the different ways you can find out more, get some help from us. We have grant support open office hours the second Tuesday of the month. You can come into our office in Marshall from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. if you want to talk through some project ideas, make sure what you're thinking about is eligible. Maybe you want to get some help attaching some work samples or filling out a budget, things like that. So you can stop in then. Then we have some Q&A sessions. We've got some in-person sessions coming up, so take a look if we are coming anywhere near you. We'd love to meet you. And also some virtual Q&A sessions planned. So check back here for registration as we get closer to those dates. You can schedule some time with me. If you follow this link, you can just choose a time on my calendar and we can meet by phone or by Zoom, or if you happen to be near our office in Marshall. So that's an option. We've got links to some other workshops that we have here, including another spot where we have videos of past workshops for you to check out. And then our last thing I want to point out here, we have some resources, especially for if you need to double check what you need to include for credit lines in any promotion that you're doing about your project, a sample contract, and some other documents that might be helpful to you. So we are going to head over to our grant system. And if you are new to the system, you can create a new account here. If you are a returning user, you would just log in. But if you're not sure whether you or somebody else at your school already has an account, just contact us and we can get that figured out for you. And I'm going to go ahead here and log in. And then I will mention if you have done some work as a grant review panelist for us before, remember to come up here and change your role to applicant to get to your applicant dashboard. So this is where you will arrive when you log in if you're returning to the system. But if you're coming in for the first time, you'll go right to this apply page. And this lists all of the applications that we have open currently. So we'll find, here's our Arts in the Schools. There's a preview button if you'd like to just take a look at the application without actually starting anything. And then there's also the apply button for when you are ready to get started. So that's what we're going to do. And I'll point out just a couple of buttons here at the top before we get into the application. We have Google Translate embedded into the site. So if you would like to work in a different language, you can choose that here and it will translate the interface and the questions for you, and you can go ahead and work in that language. We also have a copy previous answers button. So if you have done an application in the system before, you can choose from a list of previous applications to copy from, and it'll copy over answers for any questions that are the same between those two applications. So if you have a recurring project, that can be a good head start for you. Then we have the collaborate button. And this is really handy to invite somebody to come work on the application with you. What you would do is just put their email address in here, choose what level of permission you'd like to give them, and then add a message of whatever it is you'd like them to do. If you'd, for instance, like the artist to come directly in here and attach some of their information, this is real handy for inviting your principal to come in and sign the application, things like that. So you would just invite them and they will receive an email, and all they'll need to do if they don't already have an account in the system is just create a password and they'll be able to come in here and work on the application. Right, so you'll need a name for your project. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, just describing what it is you're going to do. and then the amount that you're going to be requesting. You may want to wait until you filled out your budget form to fill this in. Then we just have some of those important documents linked here again. And I'll also point out with the character limits, you'll see that a lot of the fields really allow a lot of space. We want to make sure you have enough room in case there's something you want to talk a lot about, but don't feel like you need to try and use up all those characters if you've said everything that you needed to say. All right, so you'll start describing what your project is going to be, what kind of activities will be involved, and we also would like to know which students are going to be participating. Are they from a particular school building, grade level, subject? When are things happening? It's helpful to see dates, a schedule, if there are different groups of students participating, who's participating in which part at which time, if there are going to be any participation fees involved, how will the activity be accessible to all students, and then talk a little bit about the community component that you're doing, just how you are going to share some of what you're doing. And you can enter your start and end date. Then we have your budget form, and you are welcome to create your own form, but I would suggest using this Excel form if you can, just because it does some helpful calculations for you. So you could put either your school name or project name up here, and then just start filling in whatever your costs are, and we'll get some numbers in here. And you'll see it's adding up for us down at the bottom. And no match was required for this, but let's say the school had a little bit of money they were going to contribute. And now it tells us here your request cannot exceed your cash cost minus your other funding, which in this case is $2,700, or the maximum request amount for the grant program, whichever is less. So here's our arts in the schools, and 2,700 is less than 4,000, so that's what we can request. But let's say that our project is a little more expensive. And now it says our request cannot exceed 4,700, or the maximum 4,000, whichever is less. So this time our 4,000 is less. And now we see that our profit is a negative $700. That means we've got to come up with $700 somewhere, so that our profit can equal 0. So you would fill this out, save it, and then upload back into the application. We've got a budget narrative field for you to talk about any other details that didn't really fit on that spreadsheet if you want to break down some different costs of how you calculated supplies per student or something like that. Next, we want to know some about the artists or the organizations that are involved in your project. So you can talk about either the artist here, or if you're going to art museum, some sort of professional performance, you can talk more about them here, and then why you chose that particular option. If you are dealing specifically with artists coming into the school, you can attach their resumes here along with a sample lesson plan. And then in this work sample section would either be samples from that artist, or if you are visiting a performance or institution, you can put links to their website here, just anything you'd like to put in here to show what this experience is going to be like. And if you need help with attaching work samples to here, please contact us and we can help you with that. Then you'll need to think about the outcomes of this project. And we ask you to think about How will this be supplementing your programs as opposed to substituting for regular arts programming that you might be doing? And then specifically what impact this will have on your students. And we're looking for specific changes either to artistic skills, knowledge, attitudes, behaviors. So if, for instance, you're hoping through this project that your students will have a more open attitude to poetry as a method of personal expression, that could be something. And then how do you plan to measure or prove that those changes have taken place? So what kind of results or feedback would you need to gather from those students to see if that attitude toward poetry had changed? And if you're doing some sort of survey or written evaluation, there's a spot for you to upload that here if that's something that is appropriate for your project. And then we just have some audience numbers, how many students are going to be participating, the number of hours of student artist contact time. So this would be if you took one student, how many hours would they be spending either interacting with the artist or a production you're going to or a venue you're going to be at. So if, for instance, you have a residency and the artist is spending an hour a day for a week with that group of students, it would be 5 hours that the student would be interacting with the artist. The number of artists participating, and then adult audience members. So this would be those who are involved in that community sharing. Then just collecting some data. This doesn't really have bearing on your application, just some things that we need to pass along to the state. We need school board members, some demographic information, and then some numbers about your previous year and arts activities that are not part of your regular curriculum. So here you would put your year, and then it says estimate youth served that participated in arts activities not part of the regular curriculum, adult served, and then annual expenses for the arts, again, not part of your regular curriculum. Then we just like a little information about what opportunities for assistance you participated in getting ready to apply for this grant, just to give us a little feedback on what is most helpful for people. And then the rest of this is really just contact information, your project director, your authorizing official. We ask who the grant writer is in case we've got some questions. And then you have your electronic signatures here. And again, that collaborate button can be really helpful to have somebody come in here and sign for you. So down at the bottom, we've got our submit application button for when we're all ready to submit. And then there is the save application button. This will be auto saving for you as you're working, but if you hit that save button, it'll bring up a list of the required questions that you still need to answer just so you can track your progress a little bit. So if you want to continue working, you would hit this continue button, but we're going to head back to our dashboard. And now here is this application that we just started. And if you want to go back and keep working, there's this edit application link. And then if you're awarded a grant, this would be the same place you would come back to find your contract and final report. And we'll stop again for a minute if there are any questions. Again, I don't hear any questions, so we are going to keep moving on. Just some tips for you as you are getting ready to work on your application. Think ahead to make sure you're choosing that best application date for your project. Make sure to read the guidelines and the criteria carefully. We'll take a look at those in a minute, but just to have a really good idea of what's required and what the reviewers are looking for. It's also good to start working on your application early. I know with the new monthly deadline, some of these might be a little shorter time frame that you're working on, but it's always good to give yourself as much time as possible. Then you'll have seen that a lot of the questions had multiple parts to them, so make sure you are answering each of those fully. Make sure you can check those all off. And then our reviewers really like it if you can keep your answers nice and clear and concise. No need for any fancy grant language, just using everyday language is great. It's also good to assume that the grant reviewers don't know anything about your school or your project. Maybe you have a recurring project that's really well known in your community, but that's still maybe something that our reviewers don't know about, as we have different people all of the time coming from all around the whole region. So watch out for acronyms that don't get spelled out, or mentioning programs that you don't explain. Just assume nobody knows anything. And finally, don't hesitate to contact us. We are here to help you. And different ways that you can get assistance. Again, you can talk to us before you're getting started on your application, just to make sure you're on the right track. You can get questions answered about the application as you're working on it. And then if you have a draft ready, maybe about a week or so before the deadline, SMOC staff can take a look at it and let you know if you're missing anything, if something might sound confusing. Just that draft review can be a really helpful part of the process. So after you submit your application, the first thing that happens is SMOC staff will review it for eligibility and completeness. And if we find any issues at that stage, you will have 48 hours to remedy whatever that was. And then that is SMOC staff's last contact with your request. We don't have any say over what gets funded or not. We're really here as your advocate in the process. So at that point, the round of applications will go on to a panel of individuals from around our region who will read them, discuss, score based on the criteria for the program, which again, we'll look at in a second. And then their scores go on to our board of directors who make the final funding decisions. So the criteria for this grant program are the artistic quality and merit of the project. So that's really the artist or production or institution that you've chosen and what actual arts activities are going to be involved. So that was 53% of your score. Then the impact on the participants is going to be worth 32% of your score. And this is really that impact and those outcomes that you're looking for the students. And then 15% is the feasibility of the project, which is does the timeline, budget, etc., make sense for what you are trying to do? Then we have a few additional priorities that we're looking for. So you may be awarded a couple other points on top of your score. If you are a first-time applicant to us, if your organization primarily serves BIPOC or LGBTQ communities or people with disabilities, or if you're from a county that hasn't received as much funding from us recently. So that is an opportunity to earn a couple more points. And then if your grant is awarded, you'll need to sign a contract. Those same two people, your project director and authorizing official, will need to sign that. And then the grant award will be issued out to you after we have received that contract. If you are doing any promotions, sending things out to parents, things like that. You will need to use a credit line that acknowledges the grant funding. If you look in your grant contract, it'll tell you what credit line to use based on the source of the funds that we were able to award you. You may also need to use this Minnesota Legacy logo, depending on, again, the source of the funds you were awarded, but we will spell this all out for you so there are no questions what it is that you will need to use, and send you all of that information. Then we realized as you're working on projects, sometimes things don't go as planned. And if things start heading in another direction, please contact us and we are happy to talk through things and see if there are any changes that we're able to approve to make your project keep working. We may be able to do things like extending your end date, approving some changes to your budget. Just don't be afraid to contact us if things start not going right. We are happy to help figure something out. Then you'll need to complete a final report. You'll have 60 days after the project end date that you chose to get that in. And we always suggest that when you're just getting started on your project, it is a good idea to just look through that and check what kind of information you're going to need to be gathering during your project. Then I just want to point out another opportunity that we have. We have art study opportunity for youth grants, and this is $500 for a young artist, grades 5 through 12, to go to some sort of special arts study opportunity, like a music or theater camp. Maybe they are doing some studying with a local artist mentor, things like that. So if there are any youth that you know of that might be interested in this opportunity, please send them our way. The application deadline for this year will be March 27th of 2024, and there'll be a webinar several weeks before that, on February 15th, going through all the details of that. And that was all the information I wanted to get through today. So if there are any other questions or any specific projects you'd like to talk about, we can do that now. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today, and we hope to hear from you.